Hello, I'm Sgt Brandon Brown of South Yorkshire Police Road Policing Unit. One of the biggest things for us is educating the public, trying to improve road safety, trying to reduce the number of killed and seriously injured on South Yorkshire's roads. Not only will this improve things for you, it improves things for everybody else. One of the main things that you can do is some basic checks of your vehicle once per week at least, spending 5, maybe 10 minutes making sure that the basics are covered. An easy way to remember doing this is using the acronym flowery, which stands for fuel, lights, oil, water, electrics, rubber, and finally you. You don't need any specialist skills or specialist tools to do so, just knowledge of how to look at your vehicle and start from the top to the bottom. Okay, one of the most common mistakes on Britain's roads is putting the wrong fuel in your car. I know it sounds silly, but do you know what kind of fuel your car takes? If you open up the fuel cover on your car, the fuel filler cap should tell you whether it's diesel or unleaded fuel. Diesel filler cap will be black, say diesel on it, and unleaded filler cap will be green and will say unleaded fuel on it or something similar to that. On the inside of the fuel cap cover, there will be a note which will tell you what type of fuel your car takes. Another handy tip: when you're at the fuel pumps themselves, the nozzles for unleaded and diesel fuel should only fit into the correct fuel tank on your car. So if you're filling up and it doesn't feel like it's right in the tank, stop and check and make sure you're putting the right fuel in. Another thing to note: does your vehicle take any additives? For example, this diesel car takes AdBlue. Do you know how to fill it up? Do you know how much it takes? It's worth knowing about as well in relation to your fuel. Think about, have you got enough fuel for your journey? If you haven't, have you got enough money to buy some fuel to complete your journey? Consider how far you're going. It's worthy of note that if you enter the motorway as an example, knowing that you don't have enough fuel for your journey, then you do commit an offence if you break down on the motorway. Contained on the instrument binnacle on the driver's side, a handy little tip to note: where the fuel icon is, there'll be a little arrow to either the left or the right, which indicates which side the filler cap is on your vehicle. Usually, most vehicles these days will have a range indicator. On this BMW, it's incorporated within the instrument cluster. It might be within the onboard computer in your car if you have one. If you don't have a range indicator on your car, worth noting how much mileage your vehicle will do to a full tank and reset your odometer every time you fill up. Okay, it's important to note on your vehicle where your lighting control panel is. On this BMW, for example, it's indicated here. Those are the only lighting controls within the vehicle with the exception of the indicators. It's got automatic lights. That's the one for the dipped beam. That's the one for the side lights only. Those are parking lights to the right and the left to be used when you leave a vehicle on an unlit road. And those are the fog lights. The fog lights are worth mentioning. They should only be used when there is serious reduced visibility. Once you are out of that serious reduced visibility, you should turn off the fog lights. You should not be using them to improve the look of your car. Now let's move on to checking the outside. Okay, so we're going to check the lights outside. We've got the engine running on this BMW because it's the only way that the lights will work, so that we can show you how that happens. You need to be in a position where you can see both the lights at the front and the rear when you're checking, ideally using somebody else to operate the controls inside. If we can have side lights only, please. You can check that both sides are working. Dip beam, please. Thank you, and then flash the headlights. Thank you. Left hand indicator. You'll find on some vehicles that they've got either a wing mounted indicator bulb or one in the wing mirror on the side of the vehicle, and you can check that both of those are working too. And do the right hand indicator, please. Now let's move to the rear. So in relation to checking the rear lights of your car, ideally it's easier to do if you've got somebody else to help you. You should be checking that the tail lights are working on both sides of the car. You should check the brake lights. Again, they should work on both sides of the car. You should check the indicators to the left and the right, and you should check that the reversing light works. You should also check that your rear fog light illuminates and that it switches off, as we said before. It's also worthy of mention, daytime running lights. They're standard on most new vehicles these days, but you shouldn't rely on them alone to light the road ahead. despite them being very bright. During the hours of darkness or poor visibility, you should always use your dip beam headlights. Now let's move on to checking the oil. Okay, so we're checking in relation to the oil in your car. It's opened using a lever inside the car. Might be a double action as it is on this BMW to open it, or it might well be a pull once and then there'll be something to open from the bonnet. Be careful when you open the bonnet. This is held up by hydraulic struts. Sometimes there'll be a pole that you have to put up to hold the bonnet up so it doesn't hit you on the head. Some things worthy of note in relation to the car. While you're under the bonnet, it's worth checking the coolant level, it's worth checking the brake fluid servo, and it's worth checking the power steering fluid as well. The oil's filled through the cap in the top of the engine, and there's a dipstick which is available. Sometimes it'll be yellow, sometimes it'll be red, sometimes it'll be black. Your owner's manual will tell you where it is. On this BMW, it's situated at the back of the engine. You pull it out. On the end, there will be a minimum and maximum mark on the end of either a green or red, sometimes yellow or orange marked piece. And you can see a minimum and maximum mark on there. With the use of a rag, clean it off. And it's best to check the level of your oil in the car when the engine's cold and you're on a flat surface. Put your dipstick back in. Leave it for a moment, just so that it picks up the oil that's in. And then withdraw it again, check the oil. And you can see on this car, it's just at the top where it says maximum, and that's fine. It's worth checking the colour of the oil to make sure that it's still, it should be a golden colour. If it's thick, black, tarry sort of colour, probably ready for an oil change. Now let's talk about water in relation to your car. Two bits of water you'll need. One is coolant, contained on this BMW in here. It will have a minimum and maximum markings on the bottle for most vehicles. This one's mostly dark in colour, so it's difficult to see, and it's checked using the onboard computer for the water level. You should ideally use properly mixed antifreeze or coolant available from most good hardware shops or supermarkets. The reason for this is it assists with the cooling of the engine, and it will prevent your car from freezing during the winter time. Also, in relation to your water for your vehicle, you'll need washer fluid. You can just use water. I can guarantee it won't clean your windows as well, and it will also freeze during the winter. If you use proper mixed stream wash, either from a diluted substance or a ready mixed available from most hardware shops, this will assist you in keeping your windows clean, along with making sure that your wipers are in good condition too. Now let's move on, we'll talk you through the electrics. This BMW's got keyless start and keyless entry. Some vehicles will be done off the key. To start it, for this car for example, foot on the foot brake, and we have to press the start button. When you do that, a lot of lights will light up on the dashboard. These are the engine and the car checking itself to make sure that all the sensors are working and all the bits that are working that should be. It's also worth mentioning that whilst you're in motion, if any warning lights come on the dashboard, you should find somewhere safe to pull over before you investigate further, making sure that it's safe to continue your journey if you do so, and find a mechanic if it's not. Now let's go on to checking about the rubber. We'll talk you through some general safety points first and foremost in relation to your tyres. Whether you're on a motorcycle or in a motor car, the tyres are the only bit that put you in contact with the road. And for a car, for example, it could be 4 pieces of rubber about the size of the palm of your hand that keeps you in contact with the road surface. It's therefore extremely important that you keep your tyres in good condition, with appropriate air, correctly inflated, and with good tread depth. Anything less than 3mm on your tyre can seriously reduce the handling and the stopping distance in wet conditions of your car. You should seriously consider changing your tyres at 3mm or less. The legal limit being 1.6 for a motor car and 1 for a motorcycle. I'll take you through the acronym ACT, which is a good way of remembering air, condition and tread depth. Let's have a look at the tyres a bit more closely. So in relation to the air pressures of your tyres, not only will it make you safer, but it will save you a significant amount of money if your tyres are correctly inflated. If they're underinflated, they will wear quickly, If they're overinflated, they will wear quickly. If they're underinflated, you'll use more fuel to drive along. That's notwithstanding, it'll make your car a lot more unsafe to drive if the tyres aren't correctly inflated. There's different ways of checking the pressures of your car. You could go to a petrol station forecourt with an air compressor, use one there, or you can use one of your own little devices. This one's a manual gauge. The only way of doing that, make sure it's set properly, bob it down onto the valve, press it on, and it will open up and it will tell you in PSI what the tyre pressure is set at. There are ways of checking with your own personal digital gauges, which are available online to purchase or from most good motor hardware shops. This vehicle, for example, has got tyre pressure indicators inside it on the onboard computer, and you can check the tyre pressures in there, and it also monitors while you're driving along. There are different ways of checking for the air pressure depending on what vehicle you've got. Sometimes they're inside the fuel cap cover, sometimes they're inside the driver's door, other occasions they'll be in the manual, and it's worth taking into account what you're using that vehicle for at that time. Is it just you in it? Is it full of passengers? Have you got some luggage in as well? Or are you carrying some load about in the back if you've got the seats down? It's all worth taking into account for your tyre pressures. Moving on to condition of tyre. It's worth checking around the edge of the tyre, particularly looking for any cracks, any cuts, any tears or bulges which might make your tyre unsafe. Look around the whole shell of the tyre as best you can. On the rear of the car it's a lot more difficult to do so, but you can do it by moving the car forwards and backwards ever so slightly. You can also, on the front, turn the steering lock like I've done on the BMW to show you, so that you can check the tyre. You want to be checking within the tread for any items that might be stuck in the tyre, anything that might cause you a puncture, and you'll be able to check while you're on there the wear pattern on the tread. It's significant to talk about this because overinflated tyres will wear your tyres incorrectly, underinflated tyres will wear your tyres incorrectly, and it will also cost you some more money. One, for replacing your tyres quickly, two, because it'll cost you some more fuel. The last bit we'll look at is tread. So the legal limit for tyres is 1.6 millimetres on a car, 1 millimetre on a motorcycle. It's got to be 3/4 of the tyre, so 75% of the width of the tyre, at 1.6 mil minimum for the whole circumference of the tyre, so it's all the way around. The different ways of checking the tread, there's tyre depth indicators which you can see on the tyre there. They will be the absolute minimum, so if your tyre tread is level with those, that is the legal limit. There's different items that you can use. There's calibrated gauges that we might use for a roadside check, for example. These are supplied by Highways England. These have got different bits which will give you an indication in relation to your tread depth, the red being illegal, the blue being that you're just about okay, and the yellow part on there being legal, and you place that into the tread and see where you're at. If you don't have any of those available, a 20p test. Around the edge of a 20p is a little lip. That will be a good indication. So if you put your 20p into the tyre, into the tread, and if you can see the lip there, your tyre's ready for changing. You'll be getting on towards it being 1.6 mil and being illegal. Be very careful in relation to tyres, taking them down to the 1.6 millimetre limit. Anything less than 3 millimetre will seriously affect your ability to steer and brake, particularly in wet conditions. If you're going to replace your tyre, we would always advocate you replace it with new tyres with a full amount of tread depth on. It's the only thing keeping you in contact with the road. Next we'll talk about you. Okay, so the last bit we're going to talk about, flowery, is you. Arguably the most important thing that you need to consider in relation to driving. Are you fit to drive? Think about, have you got a licence to drive that car that you're going to drive, or that van that you're going to drive, or that motorcycle that you're going to ride? Are you insured for the purposes of your journey today? Is it your insurance? Is it somebody else's? Remember, an important point with insurance, you might think that you're covered to drive on your insurance policy for somebody else, but you really need to check. Are you affected by drink or drugs? This can include medication that you're prescribed or bought over the counter. If it makes you feel drowsy or otherwise unsafe to drive, then you shouldn't do so. How are you feeling in general? Are you tired? Are you stressed? Are you anxious? You could have just had an argument with somebody. You could be feeling angry. These are not the best times to get behind the wheel of a car. All sorts to consider in relation to you and how safe you are to drive. Ultimately, it's all about protecting you. Protect yourself on the road, protect everybody else around you, help everybody to reduce the amount of people that are killed and seriously injured on South Yorkshire's roads. Thank you very much for taking the time to watch this video.